Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining MARTA's public update for the proposed sequencing plan. This is the second of 3 public update meetings this week to provide you an opportunity to hear about the new plan and ask questions to MARTA staff and leadership, as well as subject matter experts. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself and the panelists. My name is Content Terry, and I'll be serving as your moderator this evening. Next slide. We also have with MARTA, Carrie Rocha, who is the interim Chief Capital Officer. And in place of Commissioner Cavanis with the Atlanta Department of Transportation, we have with us Marcia Anderson-Bomar. So what you can expect to see this evening in regards to our agenda is some background information about the sequencing plan and how we got here, our approach to prioritizing projects, and the revisions to the sequencing of projects. And then finally, we'll give you an update on the delivery of the projects in question. So we have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to share with you. If you haven't noticed, we are on Zoom and we're in Zoom webinar, which gives you a Q&A feature. The chat is disabled. We would encourage you to use Q&A to input any and all questions that we will do our best at the end of the program to answer, verbally and online. To make things easier, I recommend that you wait for the entire presentation before entering your questions, because I'm confident that a lot of your questions will be answered through the presentation. Also, you are unable to unmute yourself. So all attendees are muted, except for the panelists and subject matter experts. And then also your video is off. What you see on your screen are email addresses and the website for additional project information as you see fit. With that, I'd like to turn the program over to Carrie Rocha.
Thank you, Content, and good evening, everyone. We're pleased to be here tonight to present the updated proposed sequencing plan for the More MARTA Atlanta program. So we'll start, as Content indicated in the agenda, with some of the background for More MARTA Atlanta. The program was first approved in 2016 when 71% of Atlanta voters cast their ballots in support of a referendum for an additional half-penny sales tax to support expansion and improvements for the transit system in the city of Atlanta. MARTA and the city then executed a robust program of community engagement to establish guiding principles and to narrow the project list. The project list was narrowed from 73 projects to 17 through a public engagement process, and that project list was adopted by the board in October of 2018. Next slide, please. With the passage of the referendum in November of 2016, the administration and MARTA responded very quickly to deploy a program of enhanced bus service. So you'll see there in February of 2017, that enhanced bus service was still put on, which was originally put on the street, with additional slugs of service that were done in 2018 and 2019. An initial IGA, which is an intergovernmental agreement, was entered in January of 2018 between the City of Atlanta and MARTA to lay out the governance process of project prioritization, establishing the Joint Prioritization Leadership Group, which was the JPLG, and they were tasked with leading the process to look at the projects that were recommended by the public vote and to make recommendations on the project sequencing. In October of 2018, the list of 17 projects was officially adopted by the board, as I noted, and the projects in the sequencing plan were subsequently adopted by the MARTA board in June of 2019. In November of 2020, a new IGA was signed to really lay out the process for executing the projects and their sequence as they were adopted. Next slide, please. So just a summary of the public engagement that was done at the time between May to October of 2018. This public engagement included faith-based organizations, business and civic organizations, the disabled community, partner forums and open houses, stakeholder meetings, NPU and neighborhood meetings, online and in-person surveys, and social media. Of the there were 7,024 surveys that were completed. Next slide, please. And here's the reminder of what the guiding principles were for the program. As you can see through the 9 guiding principles, so these are the first 4, really connectivity threads throughout all of the guiding principles. And these transit projects being able to serve multiple modes, to provide access to jobs, to create a layered transportation network. Next slide, please. And the last 5 here, to prioritize city investments while other regional transit network investments were being made, to enhance safety and access to transit centers and to MARTA stations, to ease transfers, and really to provide that last mile connectivity throughout the system. Next slide, please. So with regard to the program development, as I noted, this was done in 2 steps. And so this graphic depicts the first step was to narrow the project list from the 73 to 17. And 2 specific committees were created, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, as well as the Technical Advisory Committee. And so those were 2 committees that were created under the first IGA to work in conjunction with the Joint Prioritization Leadership Group. And that those bodies provided recommendations to the JPLG to recommend the phasing and financial strategy, the sequencing plan. So taking all that public input and providing that into a plan, the implementation plan. And again, with board approval in June of 2019. Next slide, please. So the IGA that was established in 2019, the MARTA board adopted the sequencing plan and the governance plan. And subsequently, the IGA was established in 2020. This is the IGA which established the program management team meetings and the program governance committee that was the governance body for the entire program. This is not completely MARTA. This was made up of MARTA, the City of Atlanta, and the Beltline, and that is the governance process that we have in place today. So each decision that we make as we progress these projects through the pipeline is made jointly and collaboratively. This also identified a process for modifying the list, which is the reason why we are here today. So through the IGA, we knew that project costs would change, that external factors may change. And so with that evolution, we needed a process in order to reassess the list and to look at the potential opportunities for resequencing that list. Next slide, please. So you may recognize this, and I know it's sort of cut off at the bottom on my screen, so my apologies. On the very bottom of the screen, it does show the local bus service, as I noted, which was implemented in 2017 and is still in place today at a varying level than it was originally. With regard to the sequencing plan, the original project list, the orange projects were considered LRT, the blue projects were considered ART, and the green projects were considered BRT, turquoise rather, and then the green projects were transit centers and station enhancements. I'm going to take a quick second because we did have a question last night, and I want to make sure that everybody understands the difference between the different acronyms that we use in this industry. So BRT is bus rapid transit, that is efficient, flexible bus service that is on dedicated routes primarily. It uses level boarding, off-board ticketing for the most part, in order to provide efficient service, so the buses are not dwelling at stations for very long. And again, it's a rapid service that has set stations where it stops for each location. ART service is called arterial rapid transit, and this is one level of more efficient service than your local bus service. So you can anticipate having some of the amenities of BRT, which include shelters and off-board messaging, so you know next bus arrival times that you would have in bus rapid transit. So some of those amenities, however, not all of the amenities. It does not have the level boarding, and essentially it's a higher level service and more frequent though than our local bus service. It does have off-board ticketing, again, so you can board in any door, being able to get on the bus more efficiently. And lastly, LRT is light rail transit. And the example of light rail transit that we have here is our streetcar system. HCT that you'll see here is designated for high capacity transit, and high capacity transit is anything from LRT and BRT, one of those services, so high capacity. So everything that you see here was started as planned. And so again, everything that borders on that 2020 line, we have started and moved those projects forward at MARTA. The number of projects has always exceeded the funds that the sales tax was to provide. And the program was always going to need federal funds or some other funds in order to execute. And again, that's part of the conversation that we've had from the beginning. MARTA has made significant efforts in maximizing that external funding from both federal and state sources. So we currently, to date, have $40 million that's been committed federally and nearly $20 million committed from the state. And this is unprecedented in terms of our state commitment, and we are very grateful for those contributions to move the More MARTA Atlanta program forward. In addition, one project has been accepted into the federal capital investment grant program, and that is the Campbellton Road BRT project. So as we move forward with Campbellton Road, we will be applying for either a small starts or a new starts grant to move that project forward. And so again, it's been accepted into the program, and we will follow the prescriptive process that the FTA requires for garnering additional funding. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to talk about the approach that we took collaboratively with the City of Atlanta to develop the resequencing and program prioritization. The approach to evaluating the current status of the program and determining the adjustments that were to be proposed were done in collaboration with key stakeholders. As I mentioned, the City of Atlanta, MARTA, ARC, the ATL, and the Atlanta Beltline were all part of the early discussions. We started off with this larger group to review the background that's been presented here and discuss the framework criteria and setting of expectations that we would use to make these proposed amendments to the sequencing plan. Most of the criteria discussed by the group centered around wanting projects that provided access to jobs, travel time savings, equity, and fostering economic development, all of which are criteria that are included in the original 9 guiding principles. As we reviewed the 17 projects that are in the program, particularly those that are underway in the adopted sequencing plan, we look first to those that had already had pledged state or federal dollars and had locked in completion dates. We also looked at projects that had either entered the project development phase or were preparing for a request to enter in the federal CIG program, the Capital Investment Grant Program. These are projects that have already demonstrated strong ridership potential, good land use, and competitiveness, as all of our projects will have to compete across the country for these federal funds. There are also some projects that were deemed more straightforward to execute and would demonstrate early wins in the program. Funds that are already invested in the projects that were discussed as well. So if we've already put money into these projects, the flexibility of a project to be put on hold was evaluated. So if we put a bit of money, we want to make sure that anything we did put on hold wasn't wasted. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that the projects that moved forward had the support needed for successful delivery. Next slide, please. And this one's getting my screen then cut off as well. This slide is a result of the multiple discussions that were held regarding a refresh of the project prioritization. The 17 projects on the original list were divided into 2 tiers. And the first tier represents projects for immediate delivery by 2028. These projects will receive the focus of both the City of Atlanta and MARTA in terms of prioritization for their completion. The second tier represents future projects that will begin once the first 9 are completed and additional sales tax funds or other funding sources are identified. As you will see, no projects have been removed from the list. In general, most of the changes in the plan represent dates that have been extended and a few that have dates that are earlier than expected. For example, Campbellton Road, BRT, has a completion date that is 3 years earlier than the original projected date due to the selection of a locally preferred alternative of BRT, which takes less time to design and construct than originally anticipated. The Greenbrier Transit Center will now be delivered in conjunction with Campbellton Road as well. In addition, the Cleveland Avenue and Metropolitan Parkway arterial rapid transit projects package to maximize the procurement and delivery efficiency. The Clifton Corridor has advanced earlier than anticipated with the selection of BRT as the locally preferred alternative. Lastly, North Avenue, which is nearly 15% complete at this time, will be paused at this stage and will be placed on the Tier 2 list.
Excuse me, Carrie, before you proceed to the next slide, we're having technical difficulties. So we need a moment to try and resolve it. It's our understanding that those who are participating via cell phone are not able to see the slides. They only see your beautiful face. So give us a moment and we may fortunately have to start over so that everyone can have the full experience of the presentation. Everyone, please stay with us as we try to resolve this issue. Okay, participants who are unable to see the slides, we've made an adjustment. If you can put a comment in the Q&A section and let us know if you're now able to see the current slide. Okay, so I'm starting to see that people are able to see it. Anyone who was unable to see it, can you now confirm that you can see the slides? Okay, so we have someone that still is unable to see it.
It looks like we're getting quite a few thumbs up and hearts.
Yes. Okay, I'm not getting any additional responses from people that are unable to see the slides.
Carrie, we apologize for the technical issue. I think it might be helpful for at least us to kind of just take it from the top. We apologize for the inconvenience for those who were able to see the slides, but I think if we take it back to starting with slide 5, with the more MARTA Atlanta background, I think that would be helpful for a lot of the audience to
Sure.
follow along.
No
So,
problem.
sorry about that,
And
everyone.
apologies,
Thank you.
folks. We'll try to summarize them a little bit more rather than going into detail. Hopefully, let's see. All right. So, as I mentioned, the program itself was first approved in 2016 and was approved by referendum for a half-penny sales tax to support expansion and improvements for the transit system in the city of Atlanta. And that was supported by 71% majority. So clearly, everybody was very excited about the opportunity of investing in transit services. After successful passage of the referendum, we did engage in a very robust program of community engagement. And that brought the 73 projects narrowed to 17 that were adopted by the board in 2018. Next slide. So this is the overall program timeline. With the passage of the referendum in 2016, we very quickly put out enhanced bus service to be very responsive to the support of the program. And as noted, bus service was a part of the referendum in terms of what folks had chosen that they wanted to see expanded bus service. In intergovernmental agreement, which really assisted in the stakeholder engagement process and narrowing of the project list. And that engagement happened between May and October of 2018. And some additional project work started within very early project work started within 2019. The MARTA board voted to adopt the sequencing plan that had been recommended in June of 2019. Sorry, now it's behind the thing on my screen. Apologize. So in the initial IGA led to a process for establishing governance within the program, and that governance was established by the Joint Prioritization Leadership Group, and that group was tasked with working with the Stakeholder Advisory Committee as well as the Technical Advisory Committee to make recommendations for the sequencing of the projects. And they went through several iterations of those projects to make sure that the plan as adopted represented, geographic diversity, that it served as many customers as possible within the system. And so that sequencing plan was adopted in June of 2019. The second IGA had the purpose of really providing governance for the overall program that had been provided. So that defined which projects were moving forward, which projects would be prioritized, because there was a short priority list within that second IGA, as well as how to make changes. And so this is why we are here, is the IGA requires that the program be reviewed every 5 years or more frequently if needed, and based on external factors. So that is the reason why we are here today and why we have taken a fresh look at our project list. Next slide, please. So this is the final project, a snapshot of the public engagement process that happened between May of 2018 through October of 2018, in which several surveys were completed and we were able to garner various areas of input. And that input was gained through an outreach program to faith-based organizations, business and civic organizations, the disabled community, partner forums and open houses, stakeholder meetings, NPU and neighborhood meetings, and online and in-person surveys. Next slide, please. These are the first 4 guiding principles. And as I mentioned, connectivity was really a key theme that it appears throughout these 9 guiding principles: access to jobs, and creating a layered transportation network. Next slide, please. To make sure that city investments really integrated into the regional transit network to provide safe access to transit centers and to the MARTA stations, and to provide that last mile connectivity as needed. That's essential to providing a good, thorough transit system. Next slide, please. And this was the two-step process. So the first step, as I've described, was the narrowing of the projects from 73 to 17. The more MARTA committees were the stakeholder advisory committee, as well as the technical advisory committees that provided the background and the recommendations to the joint prioritization leadership committee. And that committee then worked to provide the implementation plan in how the projects would be phased and the financial strategy to move them forward. And then this program, the original sequencing plan was adopted by the board in June of 2019. Next slide, please. And this slide just describes the second IGA that was adopted in 2020 between MARTA and the city of Atlanta. And this spoke to the governance plan between the two entities and how the city would play a role into each of the projects and how decisions would be made. It also provided a process for modifying the list and also for anything that required changes, any substantial changes, and that is defined in our IGA. Next slide, please. So this was the original sequencing plan, and I think I will jump over the descriptions of BRT, ART, and LRT. But these, again, this was the original sequencing plan. And as I noted, the commitment so far to date for federal funds is $40 million, and the state funds committed is $20 million, with additional funds that we have targeted for specific projects. Next slide, please. So as I described, this was this entire process that we're going through right now was an approach where we gathered key stakeholders in the room to have a very collaborative discussion, to establish a framework and to set expectations. And the expectations were that we would develop this project list and be able to socialize it, to work together to propose a new sequencing list. As we reviewed the 17 projects in the program, particularly those that were underway in the adopted sequencing plan, we looked first to those who already had pledged federal and state funds and had locked in completion dates. We also looked at projects that had either entered the project development phase, so we've already made a request to enter that project development phase, or we're potentially ready to enter that phase, as those are high potential projects to remain competitive across the country for federal funds. There were also some projects that were deemed more straightforward to execute and would demonstrate for us some early wins in the program, so ones that we could accomplish in shorter timeframes. And then we also looked at projects that had funds already invested that had the flexibility of being put on hold for some period of time where we wouldn't lose much ground. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that all the projects that moved forward in the program had the support that was needed for successful delivery. So next slide. So this is the proposed sequencing plan that was presented to City Council in February of this year. This slide is a result of those multiple discussions that were held, and the 17 projects are divided into two tiers. So at the top, you have tier 1. At the bottom, the projects are simply listed in alphabetical order, and those are tier 2. The tier 1 projects represent projects for immediate delivery by 2028, and these projects will receive the focus of both MARTA and the City of Atlanta to move to be prioritized and to move forward. The second tier represents future projects that will begin once the first 9 projects are completed and the additional sales tax funds or other funding sources are identified. As you'll see, there are no projects that have been removed from this project list. We'll jump to the next slide. So we'll go into a little bit of detail here. So this slide represents the tier 1 projects as depicted on a map. As you can see, the projects are prioritized that are prioritized in this tier are still geographically diverse and represent a package of improvements of various modes. So you'll see BRT, there's ART, there's transit centers, there's heavy rail stations, and the enhanced bus services noted here, as well as streetcar east extension at LRT. This tier represents 13 miles of bus rapid transit being added to our system, 10 miles of arterial rapid transit, and 2.5 miles of streetcar. Overall, these projects in this tier provide access to 10 different MARTA heavy rail stations. So the connectivity, making those key connections to expand the reach for frequent, reliable services, for access to thousands of jobs, healthcare, development, and housing. And these are all priorities of the Dickens administration and the mayor's office that we've been working very closely with them. The tier, next slide, please. So what does tier 2 mean? Tier 2 projects represent future projects that are still committed for delivery under the More MARTA Atlanta program. And as noted by the IGA, we have to take a step back at certain intervals and take that snapshot of the program to review the project status and the costs, review external conditions and factors that could impact the projects on the list, and determine which of the second tier will be in the next grouping to move forward. This will be done with an analysis of funds available and the projected project costs each time we take that snapshot. The financial modeling performed by MARTA will continue to be utilized at each of these intervals and will help predict and manage the overall program. In fact, we will rerun that model every year. We go through our actual budget program annually. Based on the initial runs of the model for the cost and schedule for the first 9 projects, MARTA has projected that funding availability for the next tier should be available around 2035. So now I'll just take a quick step through the status of the projects, the 9 projects that are in the program in the tier 1. So first up is the Summerhill Bus Rapid Transit Project, and we are very excited for this project. We have shovels in the ground, so this project has been progressing very well over the last year or so. We have completed final design. We put the project out for construction. We actually have the Department of Watershed Management out there now doing waterline relocation and relocating hydrants for us, and that work is progressing very, very nicely. Our contractor, Archer Western, has been selected and awarded the contract, and we anticipate them to be out in the field around May, probably towards late May, and we'll have a groundbreaking sometime in June that we are planning. So again, excited to see this project come to fruition and to move forward. This project is funded in part by our federal Tiger grant, a $12.6 million grant, and the balance of the program is being primarily funded by the More MARTA Atlanta sales tax. Next slide. The next slide represents 2 projects, and as I noted earlier, we have combined these into a single bid package. Cleveland Avenue and Metropolitan Parkway arterial rapid transit projects are now in the final design phase. The expected service date is in 2025, and these projects will be the first of our ART projects and will provide premium amenities such as our real-time signage, our shelters, solar power for those power amenities there, as well as, again, wider sidewalks and good access to the stop. And this will provide efficient and frequent service, more frequent service than exists today in the local bus service for this alignment. Next slide. The Bankhead Station platform extension is entering the final design phase. In fact, we have a RFP that's on the street right now to select that final designer. This project is very important because we will be transitioning the existing station, which has only a 2-car train capacity, to an 8-car train capacity. And so we want to be able to use those brand new trains that we have being constructed right now or being manufactured right now. And so we will be able to use those new trains at this station with this expansion. The development in this area is going very well, and we are doing that collaboration with the developer and working together on that master plan. So this project is being generously funded through the More MARTA sales tax, as well as our state funds that have been committed of $6 million. And that was the very first line item committed in the governor's budget for transit out of the new Uber and Lyft taxes. So we were very excited to be for this project to be awarded those funds. Next slide, please. The Streetcar East Extension project is also entering in the final design phase, and that request for proposal will be hitting the streets very soon. This is the first extension of the existing Atlanta streetcar that was constructed by the city of Atlanta and opened in late 2014. This project will extend the Beltline up to Ponce de Leon Avenue. And as we move forward with planning of this project, we are looking at, again, through final design, we'll be continuing to shape the project, looking at adjacent properties, existing utilities, what the vehicle needs are for our facility and for operational needs, how we provide access, and where the proposed stop locations are. This project is advanced with coordination between MARTA, the city of Atlanta, and the Beltline. Next slide, please. 5 Points Transformation Project is in the conceptual design phase, and this project, we also refer to that as planning. This project will transform the concourse level, which is above the two platform levels, the north-south and east-west. It will transform that concourse level as well as the plaza above, transform the surrounding streetscapes, removing the existing concrete canopy, and providing a new urban space that will improve accessibility, make better connections to our bus service, where it will be easier to make those connections between modes. This project is funded. It's a shared funding model between the the MARTA Core Penny, the More MARTA Atlanta program, a federal grant called a RAISE grant of $25 million, and state funds that have been committed of $13.8 million. Next slide, please. The Campbellton Corridor Bus Rapid Transit Project is also in the planning or conceptual design phase. This project will help improve connectivity and mobility throughout Southwest Atlanta. This corridor will link Greenbrier Mall, Oakland City, as well as terminating at the Barge Park and Ride. And this is a true multimodal investment to enhance this entire service area. So how we get to jobs, services, and other points of interest. And again, as I mentioned, this project has been accepted into the Capital Investment Grant Program, and we hope to be providing a complete application for small starts or new starts moving forward. Next slide, please. The Clifton Corridor Bus Rapid Transit Project is also in the planning or conceptual design phase. This project will reduce end-to-end transit travel from 1 hour bus ride at this point, over 1 hour in existing transit local bus to about 30 minutes and to one of our largest employment centers in the area, our largest private employer. Again, the transit travel time between Lindbergh Center and Emory would be reduced from 30 minutes to 11 minutes. So making very frequent, reliable service between those 2 points. Next slide, please. And that concludes the official presentation, and I will turn it back over to Content to start the Q&A section.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carrie, for the great presentation. Okay, there are numerous questions that have been dropped into the Q&A tab of the Zoom webinar, and our subject matter experts have been responding to quite a few of them by typing in answers. At this time, there are a few questions that we'd like to bring to the forefront and have Carrie or a subject matter expert respond accordingly. Also, for those who are calling in on your cell phone, we will provide you an opportunity to raise your hand, be acknowledged, and you can ask your question. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. It's a question in regards to what happens after the 9 priority projects are completed. So will MARTA wait until the 9 priority projects are completed before working on the remaining projects on the list?
So to answer this question, it's a very good question, because what happens if additional sales tax becomes available? What happens if projects are more expensive and we're not able to progress them as anticipated? Sometimes we run across differing site conditions. So it is our intent, as I noted, to review this program at least every 5 years. And so we will certainly take that into consideration as we do these reviews and take a look and step back at the particular factors impacting the project. So could a project from tier 2 be pulled into tier 1? Absolutely, if there were factors that might have put something on hold, or if more money became available. So again, we need to be nimble, but we also want to make sure that the commitments that we're making are ones that we can execute. And the 9 that have been presented here are ones that, based between the federal funding, the state funding, and the more MARTA Atlanta funding, that we know that we can progress through 2028.
Okay, thank you for that answer. We have a question in regards to the Peachtree Arterial Rapid Transit Project. Can someone speak to the status of the project? When is it expected to start?
So the Peachtree Road ART is actually now in the tier in the tier 2 projects. The original planned start for that project had been, sorry, I'm flipping through my notes here. The original planned start had been in 2022. However, the approach that we had taken as a team was to look at Cleveland and Metropolitan first and execute those projects. And there's also an opportunity for some lessons learned, as this is our first ART that we'll be deploying. So Peachtree Road ART is in the 2nd tier, and we'll be able to take full advantage of learning from the Cleveland Metro and Metropolitan Parkway projects in order to get that one off the ground when the time is right.
Okay. So we have another priority project question. This is regarding the 5 Points renovation, 5 Point Station renovation. So the question is, how was the renovation funded? And how will the renovation impact transit's frequency and reliability?
Sure. So the 5 Points station renovation is funded by 4, or plan funded right now by 4 sources. The largest of those sources is actually through the MARTA core penny. I believe the next funding source is roughly $165 million through the more MARTA Atlanta program. $25 million through a RAISE grant, which is a federally funded grant, formerly called the Tiger Grant, which is similar to what we have on Summerhill, but we have a RAISE grant that's been awarded for 5 Points, as well as $13.8 million that's been committed from state dollars. So that's how we plan to fund that project.
Okay, there was a question regarding attendance to last night's public forum that was at Sylvan Middle School. We had 43 attendees at that meeting. And then tonight, at our max, we had 161 participants logged on. A few people have dropped off since we've started Q&A, but this meeting is very highly attended.
So Content, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for attending. I think it's wonderful to be able to share with you all what's happening within the More MARTA Atlanta program. And I just encourage your continued input and participation. Please submit your comments. And we've given you a number of different ways to submit those comments, and we do look at them all, and we'll be summarizing the feedback from these meetings. So again, we really do appreciate your participation here tonight.
I have a couple of questions regarding Tier 2 projects. And the question is in regards to advancing those Tier 2 projects and the funding sources designated for that. So is it anticipated that there will be enough federal and sales tax revenue coming in to sufficiently advance these Tier 2 projects?
So I would start off by saying that there are a lot of dollars associated with the Tier 2 projects, the Beltline projects in particular, and you'll note from the original sequencing plan, we had identified that we really need to close a funding gap there. So if we are able to identify additional federal or state funding sources, we can absolutely advance Tier 2 projects more quickly. And that is our intent. As you know, the MARTA team works very hard at finding the right opportunities to look for additional federal funds. We have strategic calls quite often to make sure that we're not missing those opportunities, and we are talking to our partners at the federal level for those specific opportunities. So we are on the lookout. We've been able to secure, we've had great luck so far and great luck working through the program. We are so grateful for the assistance that we have with our local FTA Region 4, as well as our partners from FTA at headquarters in DC. And I, it goes without saying, we really genuinely appreciate the support that we've been given on the state level, working with our partners there. So we want to maximize what we can garner for each of these projects. Our design and plans need to be very competitive, and we do look at it through an eye of making sure that these projects serve as much ridership as possible, that we have the densities around the projects that we need in order to make them as competitive as possible.
Okay. All right, I'm glad to see that our subject matter experts are tackling quite a few of these questions for us. So please make sure that participants that you look in the Q&A section so that you can see the answers to a lot of these questions. There is a question in regards to several projects being transitioned from the original light rail transit mode to now a BRT mode. So Carrie, can you describe how the decision for the transition to light rail to BRT occurred? I know every project is different, but if there's a overarching theme that you could possibly share with us.
Sure. So I would state that there is no overarching theme. Every single project that we look at is different, and we go through a process called alternatives analysis in order to properly evaluate a corridor and what's in that corridor and the land use that's in that corridor, the potential right-of-way impacts, as well as the cost. And so our ability to execute these projects in a timely fashion, to perform the design, and again, all of those, what are we serving, what are some of the constraints that we have, particularly with engineering. As we know, light rail has a footprint that is required to operate safely. Bus rapid transit has a narrower footprint and can tend to be much more palatable for a neighborhood. And we've seen some of those very context sensitive designs that have been deployed around the country. So, we do look quarter by quarter to make that decision. I'm going to actually ask if we can ask Marcus Arnold to possibly weigh in here. I know he's worked on the Campbellton Road project. If you wanted to add anything, Marcus.
Yes, Carrie, as you mentioned with the Campbellton Road project, we went through an alternatives analysis process. And really it was a multi-year process to look at evaluating different evaluation criteria, technical criteria, but also to gathering public input to come to a recommendation for the locally preferred alternative, which ended up being center running BRT. And so the thought is that it does provide and will provide more efficient, faster service for the corridor with the same, if not comparable features as you would see with light rail as well.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.
I have a question in regards to the streetcar extension project. And so can we have someone kind of go through the process of how it was, how it's become such a priority project, despite there being both some public support and some public not supporting the project. So can we have someone speak to the streetcar?
Sure.
And how it's advanced?
Sure. So I will just start this off. There are a number of folks that are proponents of the streetcar, and there are a number of folks that we're hearing from that are opponents of the streetcar. And I would just say that we're taking all of this into, back into consideration. The one thing I'll note is that the project is moving forward. It is a priority of the Dickens administration to move this project forward. And so MARTA has been working very diligently to provide the planning and design work to move it forward. And I would just ask Brian Hobbs, if you could, who is our project manager. There he is. Hey, Brian, if we could just get him to say a few words on the streetcar as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Carrie. So with the streetcar, we've heard the concerns, but we've also heard the proponents of the car as well. We've gone through an alternative, well, not an alternative analysis, but what I'll say is, this has been in the works for a little while here. It started with ABI in the city of Atlanta. So Atlanta Beltline Inc. is part of it, the city of Atlanta. And we took it over and just continued that work. But we did do a detailed analysis on where this car is going, the benefits of the car, and so forth. And so, again, you do hear proponents, and then you do hear people who do not support it. However, I think that at some point here, it's at 30%. We'll continue to be engaged with you all, and those who do not currently want to see the project go forward. We'll continue to engage you in the next phase and continue to see how we can come to some happy mediums here, because this is a priority, as Carrie mentioned, of the city of Atlanta.
Thank you, Brian. We have a question in regards to service enhancements, and it's a two-part, well, two questions I'm combining. Has the changes to service improved the headways? And is there a document that is accessible that can show the routes and schedules pre the MARTA enhancements and how they stand currently, so we can see a comparison?
Yeah, and thanks, Content. And I think this is kind of a couple of broad questions regarding enhanced bus service, both before and the changes from before the MARTA referendum and after. So I think we should have Ryan Van Sickle available.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we can certainly speak to how the bus service enhancements. MARTA did implement a variety of bus service enhancements through more MARTA. These included expanded hours, more frequent service, extensions, or other changes to routes, and some entirely new routes, such as our community circulator routes, as well as others like Route 94 Knightstride Drive. Related to headways were improved on some routes within months of the more MARTA vote, specifically to operate about every 15 minutes or better on 5 particular routes, including 78 Cleveland Avenue, as well as 71 Cascade. However, there were improvements made across the system to other routes, depending on the route at other times of day. So some routes also saw midday headway improvements, nighttime, and also on weekends. I think that is a quick summary of the headway improvements. And Greg, I apologize. Can you remind me the second part of that question?
The question was, is there a way to compare?
That's right. Yes. And I would say that the method that I can share for that, the website, marta.com currently reads live schedules. And so that has our current information. I don't believe that there's currently a document online that compares the two, but you can view our past schedules using the Internet Archive would be one way to do that comparison.
So Ryan, I'll also share, we have a project that is in the works, as we've had a number of different questions on this, and particularly what we want to try to prepare is a data book to share, how routes have changed. So what the team is working on is preparing that book. So if you have a particular route, what it looked like pre-more MARTA, and then what the changes were, and we'll actually show you, a map of the area. So we are in preparation of that data book, because we do recognize there are so many enhancements that were launched, and wanted to make sure it was relative to each route. So we're working on that, and we will make that public.
Okay, we have a few questions in regards to BRT, and that's bus rapid transit, and standards that MARTA would like to achieve. So what's the typical size of a bus rapid transit station? And is there a targeted frequency and headway goal that MARTA would like to achieve with BRT?
Sure. So bus rapid transit for MARTA, we do plan on using, and I'll use Summerhill as the example because it's the project that's been designed. But all of our BRTs will have level boarding. So very fast boarding. You can board through any door on that platform. The buses are 60-foot articulated electric vehicles. And so again, the stations will be designed for that 60-foot bus. Down in Summerhill, our terminus station called Carver Station will have capacity for multiple of our buses, because we will have a charging station down there, and on route charger. Other standards include having completely covered shelters so that you're protected from the elements, real-time information, real-time passenger information with maps, so you can find your way very easily, and off-board fare collection. So BRT is operated a little bit differently in most locations, where you would purchase your ticket and you validate that ticket before you get on the bus, and it's called proof of payment. So there will be fare inspection, and folks will, our fare inspectors will ask you to present a validated ticket to show that you validated your ticket. And that's not at every stop or every bus. However, those will be random checks. So that's how proof of payment works in most locations that operate a bus rapid transit service. I think I've captured most of the operating on headways. So most BRTs tend to target during peak times 10 to 15 minute headways. I believe on the Summerhill BRT, we've targeted right in that range between 10 to 15-minute headways. At off-peak hours, I think no longer than a 30-minute headway. But again, we try to achieve that, and we'll be finalizing those service plans depending on, well, in the coming months as we really start to do our system activation on Summerhill. Just trying to think, Content, if I've missed any of the features for BRT.
Carrie, we've got a few more questions that are related to Summerhill. I thought it might be good to pull in Greg Holder and maybe just while we're on the topic, get to a few more of them. If that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right. We had another question asking related to Summerhill. Why is Summerhill BRT not featuring center running dedicated transit lanes as opposed to the current design, which has curb running dedicated transit lanes? So that's one for Greg. There's also a question about enforcement of vehicles in those lanes. So maybe Greg, if you could start with that. Or Carrie, if you want to start and then pass it over to Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just tee it up for Greg. I think, again, every project is different, and we're looking at the footprint that we have to work with in order to provide the required sidewalk distance, if there are any sort of cycle lanes that we need to accommodate for, as well as the widths for general purpose lanes and for our buses. And so as you look across the particular location that you're trying to put your BRT in, we need to look at all of those factors in order to determine where you can have your station. So a center running BRT may need to have more footprint in order to accommodate the stations versus if you have curb running. It also matters in terms of what type of service you're trying to provide. Again, if you're able to accomplish dedicated lanes, and again, as I noted, we try to achieve within BRT, as much dedicated lane. I believe that our Summerhill project will have 85% dedicated lane. And Greg Holder, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to the Summerhill BRT comments in terms of center running versus curb running. I think some of those decisions were made well before you and I were engaged, but
yeah. That's basically what I was gonna get to as well. Yeah. But you did hit it on the head with regards to the lanes and the real estate that's actually out there that we can operate in. We do have 85% dedicated lanes running in the project, and that's actually pretty good, and that'll allow us to keep our headways. One thing is that vehicles are not allowed into the BRT lanes except for, and because ours are curb running, when they're getting ready to make right turns, then they're allowed to get in the lane just before they're making the right turn. But with regards to enforcement, we currently have police enforcement in place, but we have some legislation that is drawn up and prepared to be presented in 2024 to the General Assembly in order for us to get camera enforcement with the BRT lanes. And so that will be a lot more enforcement. That'll be like sleeping police, so to speak. So when vehicles get in there, it'll take a picture of the license plate and they'll be actually sent a ticket.
thanks, Greg.
All right.
All right, great job, guys. I would like those who are on audio only, provide them an opportunity to ask a question. I believe on your keypad, you hit *6 and to raise your hand, and then you'll be allowed to ask a question. While we wait for that, I would like everyone to know that this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on MARTA's YouTube channel in the next day or so, most likely tomorrow, so that you'll have full access of all of the slides and the presentation and all of the Q&A. Has anyone raised their hand?
Not seeing anything.
Okay, great. Here's a question in regards to cost. Is cost over time being considered in addition to upfront costs, such as the number of vehicles, number of operators, and vehicle replacement and repairs?
Yes, so for every project, we've developed a financial model that includes all of the costs and the year of expenditure that we plan to spend the construction dollars. Once that project goes into what we call revenue operation, or it starts its service, you'll see within our financial model that we have started adding in the costs for operations and maintenance. And within that operations and maintenance line, there is a portion of that money that is put aside for sustaining capital. So that's to make sure we have the money to sustain the investments that we have. And, you know, as we know, we need to continually invest in replacing those assets at some point in time, right? They go past their useful life. And so we do have that included. And much of that is forecasted based on, you know, what we know today for our existing cost per revenue hour and mile. And, you know, we've got, we keep track of all of that data, and we report that to the National Transit Database annually. And so the cost for revenue hours, revenue miles, and then the facilities that are needed to care for those, for that equipment. So again, there's a portion of those costs that are attributed to keeping a system in operation. So as we look at the financial new operational component, we have added that into the financial model.
I have a question in regards to bus network redesign. Can you give us the status of the bus network redesign project, and what effect does it have on the more MARTA projects?
Sure. So the bus network redesign, I'm going to ask Ryan Van Sickle to add to this. I'll just start off that we just recently went to the MARTA board and adopted a proposed range between the ridership and coverage models. That gives us the ability now to kind of target the drawing of new maps as we move forward. And then those new maps will go out to the public, and we want your input on the maps that we put forward. So again, the target for the bus network redesign is to, you know, to be very open with the process, but to be more efficient in how we deliver our services and to provide more frequent service on specific routes. And Ryan, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Certainly, Carrie. So as Carrie mentioned, then we recently had a major milestone with the approval of a policy framework to guide the actual network design activities. And so that does take a step towards ridership in the ridership coverage balance. As we work through and design the draft new network, then we will be bringing that back to the public for comments and feedback and input. It's going to be very important for us to hear from everybody the reactions to that network. And so we do expect that to be happening later this summer.
And as we look at the impact of the bus network redesign on the more MARTA program, we anticipate that through this redesign, we can optimize what we're putting into the bus service enhancements. So we anticipate that we'll be able to reduce the contribution that is being made on the bus service enhancement side that's coming out of more MARTA, and again, presenting a holistic network moving forward.
Thanks, Carrie. We have a North Avenue BRT question. And can you just refresh your memory? What's the status of that? It's in tier 2, correct?
I apologize. I believe that's North Side Drive as opposed to North Avenue BRT, but we could speak to both. Is that, or no, North Avenue, I'm sorry.
So with regard, I do see some Northside Drive questions too. So I think we can address both of those, of course. So North Avenue is a project that originally had been set out for 2 phases. And you can see in the original sequencing plan, The initial phase was pretty early on in the program with a second phase that was relatively late in the program. When the pandemic occurred, we kind of took a fresh look at that. We were looking at doing some operational enhancements to that corridor, and that did not come to fruition because of some of the activity that was happening with the smart corridor elements. And I'm going to actually ask one of our project managers, I think either Marcus, I think you're the, not sure which of our, my
Yeah,
apologies.
Carrie, I
There you go.
can, yep.
Are you the right
No
person
worries.
on that one? Sorry.
No, no worries. Yeah, so we did, there was some initial planning activities that were conducted for the phase 1 of the North Avenue BRT project. So we did conduct some of the preliminary planning as well as some conceptual design for that. And as part of, I guess, with the resequencing of the projects, I think with phase 1 and phase 2 being part of that, I think provides an additional opportunity to kind of look at the corridor holistically and evaluate that at this time as well. So that was just one of the other areas that we looked at as part of this process.
Great, thank you, Marcus, for that. We have another Streetcar East question. Are the dedicated lanes for the existing streetcar sections being considered by Atlanta DOT in coordination with MARTA?
So I'm going to ask either John Saxton or Marcia Anderson-Bomar.
Yeah. Hi, this is Marcia. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Yeah. So MARTA and the city, MARTA and the city of Atlanta are working very closely together. So any project in discussion, we are meeting on a very regular basis. Projects that include the Beltline, we loop the Beltline team in as well, but we are meeting regularly and discussing all the different projects. But to Carrie's point, you know, we're very interested in getting input and feedback, you know, from all the constituents, people who are interested in the program and the services, so that we can be sure that we're taking that into account as we go through these evaluations together.
Thank you, Marcia, for that. We have a question in regards to the Greenbrier Transit Center. And if we can get someone to update us on that status, and then what is the process for designing that transit center?
Yep.
We'll go to Marcus on this one.
Thank you. Yeah, so the process, so we have begun collecting existing conditions information for the general area that we're looking at for the Greenbrier Transit Hub. And so the process is really looking at potential sites for consideration, and we'll go through a process of evaluating sites based on various criteria, some things such as access and constructability, and also to getting input from stakeholders in the public. And so once we get to a selected site, we will be starting to look at some of the specific features to start conceptual design, as well as other amenities that we want to look at, as well as an environmental assessment of the site as well. So quite a bit of steps in the process, and looking forward to engaging and getting input on those as we move that project through.
Thank you, Marcus. There's a question in regards to the priority projects in the list. How can we ensure that inflation won't make the project list irrelevant?
So the question is, how can we make sure inflation won't make the project list? So if I'm reading into this a little bit more, how do we know that the tier 2 projects will get built if inflation continues to rise, right? And, you know, I would say that we've, within our financial model, we do incorporate inflation rates, we do incorporate, you know, and projections, we incorporate contingency, we incorporate any of the project escalations that are needed, again, to get a total project cost. I can't guarantee that inflation won't exceed amounts that you know, to a point that projects, you know, will see some stress in terms of maybe we need to cut them back. Maybe we need to, again, wait a little longer for those projects. And again, we can't see 40 years into the future. So I can't say that we can guarantee that inflation won't play a role here. It will play a role, and we need to manage that as best as we can with our projections, with our risk models, and with incorporating any of the contingencies.
Thanks, Carrie. I know, Greg, Rita, you're helping me tag team these questions. There any additional ones you want to advance that aren't being answered by subject matter experts using the online chat?
Yeah, thanks, Content. Sorry, just making sure they're coming in fast. Let me.
So I just wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow is the last of a 3-part series of our engagement and the introduction of the sequencing plan update. So on tomorrow evening, we will be at All Saints Episcopal Church, which is adjacent to the North Avenue MARTA station. The meeting begins at 6 p.m. It's in person on the MARTA line, and we'd love to see you there. Light refreshments will be served.
Actually, Yinka, if you're able to advance to the last slide, we have some of that information so it can be up on the screen. And just wanted to emphasize this will be a good opportunity. You know, we recognize there are a lot of questions we are not going to get to. We've got about 10 minutes left. We'll try to get to some more of them, but if you would like to come back out tomorrow night and really get some face-to-face time with some of the presenters and the subject matter experts, that would be a great opportunity to do so. And we'll go back to the questions and get a few more of these marked for a response.
And again, this recording will be made available via the MARTA YouTube channel tomorrow for your viewing.
And Content, so I just marked one that's a bit of a higher level question that I think would be helpful for some folks if they have not been to some of the project meetings for a few of these projects. Asking, can you describe this decision-making and local engagement when selecting BRT or LRT for a project? And this is something maybe Carrie could answer at a high level and then possibly be supplemented by a couple of the project managers for projects where we have recently gone through this process, such as Campbellton Corridor and Clifton Corridor.
Absolutely, Greg. So I think we partially answered this one earlier when we talked about the alternatives analysis. So as we go through an alternatives analysis, our planning teams sit down and look at the opportunities within a corridor to see what can be constructed, and literally visualize constructing, you know, a full system, whether it's say a BRT system or an LRT system. They may include different numbers of stations. They may include different alignments. They may include different routing at times. And so to be able to look at the different alternatives, we do kind of put a full package together, do projections on the ridership based on where the station locations are and the frequency of service. And then we put a cost estimate together for each of those alternatives. It is a very public process. We do at many instances sit with the public and do these public meetings and allow the, many of the projects have had surveys, and I will ask Brian Hobbs probably to talk about specifics on what we did say for Clifton Corridor. But we do have those incremental points where we stop and we ask questions of the public. We want certain areas of input for maybe there's a particular concern that we're looking at an alignment for a particular location, connection location. Maybe we have two options in terms of where we're going to make a heavy rail selection. So getting that input and that feedback is really important, and that will feed into how we weigh out the different pros and cons for each of the projects. Because if you make a connection at one location, it may have higher ridership but more cost versus another location, which might be less expensive but provide connections to other modes. So there are trade-offs to all of this, the options that we make recommendations for. And again, that's kind of the general approach that we take as a project team. And Brian, it might be good to give an example of kind of the process that we went through, say, on Clifton Corridor.
Yeah, no, Clifton's a great example. As many of you know, Clifton's been around for a while and it's switched modes a couple of times. And that is because we do have to go back each time and look at these different modes and the things that have changed within the area. And as we talked about earlier, that's part of the alternative analysis, just to make sure that the route, the mode of transportation, that both of those things still hold true, that they're meeting a purpose and need for the community. And so we do go through a process again of evaluating the current alignment or locally preferred alternative to see if it still meets the need of the constituents. And so with Clifton, as you know, we went from light rail to BRT. Now, part of that alternative analysis included looking at each of those modes as well as the alignments along that we've studied over the years. And then when new things come up, such as partners coming along, that gives you another opportunity to look at benefits that you can obtain from new partners coming along the project. And we saw that with Clifton Corridor with a very significant development with a partner that allowed us to go back and do an alternative analysis and say that BRT is going to be an excellent opportunity for us to build a project such as this. And so those are some of the things, as Carrie mentioned, that happens in the during this process, during alternative analysis. So we go back and look at things, and Clifton is a great example of that.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Here's a question about the future and the vision for expanding high capacity transit. So what's MARTA's vision or take in extending the existing high capacity transit lines?
And just to clarify, I think you're referring to heavy rail. Is that correct, Content?
Yeah, sorry. Yes,
Okay.
that's heavy rail. Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks.
So at this time, an extension to those lines is not part of this More MARTA Atlanta program. In terms of what's MARTA's position, I think we're always open to looking at ways that we can serve our transit customers best. I think there's some great opportunities at looking at further reach of MARTA. And to me, the investment in our transit system is incredibly important. We were asked a question last night about, with so many changes, why are we continuing to invest in our transit system? And I feel very passionately about we need to provide the best services, the best connectivity as possible. Again, no matter the mode, that we can provide reliable service for people to have access to jobs, access to livable spaces, and the development that we know we are going to continue to see here in Atlanta. As I noted last night, the traffic patterns may have changed, but we continue to see more cars on the road. And having reliable transit options is very, very important for folks that want to either live car free or be able to travel very efficiently from one part of the city to another. So I would broaden that to say, you know, we continue to want to see advancement or investment rather in our transit system. And we're open to the possibilities of wherever our systems go.
Thanks, Carrie. So just as a reminder, after these sessions, we will document all of the questions and answers that have been asked and answered. And even those that have not been answered publicly, we will draft a response and make them accessible for you on the website. All project information is located at itsmarta.com/more MARTA. Also, if you'd like to attend tomorrow's meeting at All Saints Episcopal Church, we'd appreciate it if you registered so that we can have a head count to ensure that we have plenty of refreshments and can plan accordingly. The registration link for the meeting is also located at itsmarta.com/more MARTA. So we are approaching 7:30, which is the end of our meeting. At this time, I'd like to thank everyone that has participated this evening, taking time out of their day and time with their families to join this very important conversation. Again, we will give you another opportunity to engage with MARTA leadership and subject matter experts on all of the priority projects and the status of the resequencing plan initiatives tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. at All Saints Episcopal Church. So with that being said, thank you again for this opportunity to engage with us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And please visit our website, itsmarta.com/more MARTA, to learn more about the project initiatives and also leave comments. With that, we'll conclude tonight's meeting, and we look forward to seeing you in the immediate future. Have a great evening.